Hey everyone, and welcome to the Endurance Collective podcast. On today's episode, I'll be sitting down with Mitch Sugg, who's a leadership speaker and development coach, pastor, and friend. And we're going to be talking about leadership and his book, Lead Well. Take a listen to our conversation now on the Endurance Collective podcast. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Endurance Collective podcast. This is your host, Josiah Garcia, and with me today, I have a leadership and development coach. I have a pastor and a friend, Mitch Sugg. Welcome to the Endurance Collective podcast.
What's up, buddy? How are we?
Man, I'm excited to have you. I appreciate you taking the time today, and man, we're just going to talk life.
Yeah.
Talk life and leadership.
Pumped, man.
I heard you're an expert on that. So.
I don't know if I'd say expert, but I'm trying to learn how to do it.
Well, listen, man, before we jump in, I know I've shared this with you at times, and I just want to publicly say it here on the podcast too, that I appreciate your leadership and the value that you've added to my life and to ministry and to church and to family. And so I'm grateful for you. I'm thankful for you and the impact that you've made on my life in the short time that we've known each other. Yeah. So I appreciate it, man.
Well, man, thank you. Honored to really just walk alongside life, kingdom, all the things that you're doing with the Endurance Collective and this podcast, even, and just church world, and even outside of church world. You've believed in me in a season of my life, outside just in the business context, and so I appreciate all that. So I'm pumped.
Yeah. Likewise, man. And going to now kind of how we met, man, I like to always open this up, give a little bit of background about not only who is on the podcast, but also how we connected, how we interacted, and how we find ourselves sitting here today, because it's a really cool thing that I get to do here and through the collective in connecting with people and really sharing what God is doing in their life, what God is working through them, the call, the ministry, whatever it is that they put their hand to. And we connected at a time in your life when you were right in the middle of a church plant.
Yeah.
And at the time, man, I was about to get into that. Right. And so we kind of walked similar paths. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But man, one of the reasons that I was really drawn to you, and I've shared this with you as well, but before we started the church, I was going to every church possible. And I was visiting churches, spent time all across DFW, went to Oklahoma, spent some time visiting churches in Oklahoma, just trying to gather information. You know how it is, planning a church. It's like you have no idea what's coming, and you don't know how to do this. You don't know anything, and so you're trying to collect as much information and learn as much as you can. And one of those stops was actually, I didn't go first. Someone else went to your church on the day that you guys launched, and they came back. They told me, they were like, "Man, this guy, there's something special about him. He was so hospitable. He treated us well. He was so welcome and inviting." And so I was like, "Well, I'm going to stop by." And I remember stopping by, and I was treated exactly the same way. So,
that's good. That's good. I didn't.
Yeah.
That didn't change.
Well, but here's the thing, man. We stopped. I went to so many churches, and that was not always the case. And, kind of one of those weird things, I guess a church thing, right? And especially church leadership. It's kind of, you stop by places or whatever, and it's like, well, who are you trying to steal, or what are you really here for? What are your motives? And that's, not everybody. There was people just like you that were very much welcoming and ready to help and to really come together and work together as a church, which is the heart of the collective.
Right.
And you shared that. And so I think from that point, we've really connected, and we've been, staying in touch as much as we can. So
yeah, man, it's been, what's it been? A couple of years, 4 years now?
Yeah, 3-4 years. Yeah. Time flies. And so,
it does.
Yeah.
I remember, you may ask this question, I know, but I remember you had some stuff stolen.
Yeah.
And you called and were like, "Hey, we were portable."
Yep.
And so I was like, you were like, "Can we use your baptism?"
Yep.
And I was like, "Yeah, it's basically a hot tub."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you guys were there, and so I mean, just from those little moments, I think that we've really shared just a common theme, which really all Christians should share, all churches should share, and that's that we're building the same kingdom, that we're working towards the same goal. And I love that about you, and I also appreciate that. So, man, I'm excited, like I said, to have you on here and just to talk more and let people hear your heart too, and to allow you to be the blessing to those who listen, those who watch, in the same way that you've been to me. So, all right. So this is about you, man. This is not about me. So let's talk life. Let's talk leadership. Tell me a little bit about like just you in general, man. Like, where did you come from? How were you introduced to church in general? Yeah. I mean, did you grow up in the church? Who kind of led you towards the church and ultimately into salvation? Yeah.
So I am a fourth generation pastor's kid.
Awesome. So you were there from the beginning.
2 weeks old, week old, day old, raised in the church.
Yeah.
So I surrendered my life, publicly confessing and surrendering my life to Jesus when I was young, 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
Now, I ran from a lot of that for some years in between. Wasn't real serious about my faith.
Yeah.
In high school, I began to be more serious about my faith. And then I went to college, did the same thing. I started leading worship.
Yeah.
I kind of got into that world for a long time. And then my brother-in-law planted a church in Arkansas, which is where I'm originally from. And he was like, hey, why don't you come and be our young adults and college guy?
Yeah.
So they were about 6 miles from the University of Arkansas. And so I spent a lot of time just working with young adults. And I loved that because as a student pastor, people have to like sign off on where kids go. But when you're 18, it's like, let's just go.
Yeah.
And so I did that for free for about 10 years. And then I wound up taking a job in North Carolina as a student pastor of a church there. It was over all student ministry and grew that to some success. Wound up launching a conference out of that. It was called United Conference.
Yeah.
From that birthed a church. And that's how you and I met. And we wound up launching a church from North Carolina to Texas. I tricked 6 people into moving with me from North Carolina.
Awesome.
Don't know how that happened. And they packed their bags and headed out. We wanted to go change the world, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun, still is. But yeah, so I mean, I'm a pastor's kid. My dad shaped my faith a lot.
Yeah.
I tell people this often. I don't know that I can recall a lot of my dad's sermons or messages because I was a pastor's kid and I probably slept more than I listened.
Yep.
But I saw a lot of them lived. And so I watched my dad live out messages every single week. And I thought if I can just be half the guy my dad is, then I'll be doing well in life.
Yeah.
And that's probably still debatable for some people, including myself, if I'm half the man my dad was. But here I am today, just loving God, loving people, trying to help develop them and lead them in a way that I think uses the gospel in the church context and in the business context. Yeah. Because I think that marketplace ministry is essential for the Great Commission.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I love what you're sharing just about just your exposure to the church early on, and then ultimately having someone in your life that like cared about you, that invested in you. Obviously, it's your dad, but was there not to only preach something but to live it out. Because I think so many people, especially in the church, pastors' kids, especially people that grow up around ministry, that's not always the case. And that's always been something that I've really kept close to my heart, in the fact that my family is my first ministry, right. And I want to be able to really live out every sermon that I've ever preached, or anything that they hear me say from a pulpit or a platform. It's like, man, my biggest platform is in the home, right. With my kids and in my marriage and everything else, right? And so that's amazing.
It was really cool because so when my brother-in-law planted a church, he became that that role. He and my sister became my pastors.
Yeah.
And I tell him this often, like, or as much as I can. I don't know if I not often enough,
yeah.
but I'm standing on the shoulders of my dad, my brother-in-law, and my brother, whom all kind of paved the way for me, all in ministry.
Yeah.
And I watched them make mistakes. I watched them do things that they wish they would have done different. I asked questions. I failed with them. They let me do stuff that they should have never let me do, like preach, play musical instruments, and all these things that really have helped shape me. So without the empowerment of, 3 men that were all family, I wouldn't be the man that I am today. So I'm thankful for all those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important, man. And just all of this, right? Also, one of the things I hear in your story, I think I hear so often in testimonies, and it's really my testimony as well, of especially those that have kind of grown up in the church. It's kind of like if you're exposed to it, I honestly, like, sharing my testimony would sound very similar to yours. I grew up in the church since I was 2. Wasn't a pastor's kid or nothing like that, but my family was in the church. I was saved personally 8 years old, 7 or 8, baptized, and then kind of found myself kind of going through the motions. And it wasn't until I was about 18 that it was like real for me, and that I took that next step. What was it for you, like, through that moment? I know it might be a long time ago, but what was that, like, moment that the light bulb switched for you? Was there a specific moment?
Yeah, I was at this plays such a vital role in a lot of us who grew up in church. I was at camp.
Yep.
I was at church camp one summer, and at that point in time, I was not playing any instruments. I had dabbled with some. My family's very musical, and so I'd played some a little bit, but I was standing on the front row at camp, and I'm a worshiper, and I had a guy. It's the third day of camp, and this guy comes up to me and he says, "Hey, I've been watching you all week." And he's like, he literally said, I had sang, but I had not led.
Yeah.
He said, "Have you ever led worship?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I think the Lord wants me to tell you that a season is coming in your life that you're going to be leading worship." And for me, I was like, "Nah, bro.
Yeah.
I ain't about that life, not me." And I remember that after that, though, starting to take my faith way more serious.
Yeah.
And what it looked like to follow this guy called Jesus. And it changed my life. I'll never forget that moment of him speaking that into my life, and me actually doing it later on in my 20s.
Yeah.
So I was probably about 16 when that happened.
That's awesome, man. So next question. So kind of introduced, if you would, to ministry in at least one context through music and through worship. When did that transition into preaching? Because I mean, ultimately that came right at some point, starting a church. When did that kind of develop?
When I went to go be a young adult pastor.
Yeah.
Because I had started, I was in Bible school, or I was playing basketball at a school called Central Baptist College, great college, and I started feeling this tug of like, hey, I think that music is cool, but I don't think this is going to be the end all be all journey.
Yeah.
So I started doing some things in college a little bit that would, like, some small group stuff that would allow me to teach. They were terrible. Like, all the teaching was awful. But they allowed me to fail. So when I went back to Northwest Arkansas, which is where they launched the church, I started a young adult ministry called The Life. It allowed me to preach once a month. And that's where it started, like, how am I putting this together? You start listening. That's in 2003, probably. So, like, that's when you first hear about guys. That's when, like, digital, like,
just content.
Content started. Like, Craig Rochelle had launched Life Church.
Yeah.
Mars Hill was launching some of their stuff. And you kind of started seeing this stuff on YouTube, and you could connect. And Before that, you got tapes and CDs from people.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how you listen to other preachers. So you just start to find your own way through it.
Yeah.
But really what you're doing is you're becoming them and not finding your own voice. So even in that,
absolutely.
I would take from them and other preachers from like DVDs, anything that I could find. And what happens is you start to develop a voice for this person or that person. And you don't even realize, like, I couldn't preach like Bishop Jakes because I was in rural Arkansas. Like, that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I was younger, I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then it wouldn't have worked. But then on the flip side of that, there was a ministry in Colorado Springs called The Mill. It was a young adult ministry. Pastor Aaron Stern, who has launched an amazing church in Colorado Springs, or not in Colorado Springs, but in Colorado now. But their ministry took off, like 1,000 young adults in Colorado Springs, which is not a college town.
Yeah.
He and a guy named Glenn Packiam, who's the pastor as well. And I just started consuming a lot of their content. And I really morphed myself into them again. And eventually you find your voice. And it took a while, years.
Yeah.
Years. I was still probably trying to find some of that voice. I think it's a craft that you work on often. So, yeah, when I took over young adult, when they asked me to come be a young adult guy, I was like, yeah, and I'm going to preach. And it was bad.
Yeah.
So bad.
Do you remember how long your first sermon was?
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't long at all. You have like 6 pages of notes and you go through them and like, oh, that's it?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah, it's the worst.
It is the worst. And then you realize, like, I'm not good at this.
Yeah. Well, what did I sign up for? This is an absolute like train wreck.
Yeah.
Why did they give me a microphone?
Yeah. We've all had those moments, especially those who are in ministry or ever held a mic and preached in front of a crowd, anything like that, for sure. So it sounds like, obviously there was moments where you began to develop in the faith. You were called to ministry. At what point, and some of this might come natural, but at what point did leadership begin to develop, or was it something that you saw within yourself? Was it something that, like the man who said, "Hey, I see you in a season of worship"? Was it something that someone else saw in you? When did you see leadership begin to develop, and when did you start to run with that in your own life?
Some of it honestly comes naturally. So as a 10th grader, I was starting on our basketball team as a 10th grader, telling everybody, here's what you need to do here. It was a natural kind of way that I operated. As a 10th grader, on the football team, I went to a small school, so you played every sport you could.
Yep.
But a guy that was ahead of me that was a senior got hurt. I was thrusted immediately into a free safety position that I did not need to be in. I was scared to death.
Yeah.
But I had to know what coverages we were running, what we were doing. I would call out, as a 10th grader, I was calling out the coverage plays for my high school football team.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And so it was just kind of a natural thing. And then once my brother-in-law decided he was going to plant a church, I picked up John Maxwell's Developing the Leader Within You, and it changed my life for forever. That type of content, I wasn't a reader.
Yeah.
And when I read that content, I instantly became fixated on how to develop myself as a leader. Much more than just like an athlete, but like, how does this play out when I'm leading people, when I'm leading a team? How does my posture or my body language scream at my team? Like the people that, like, so all these things that John Maxwell teaches in his leadership and in his development, I began to consume. And so any book that I could get my hand on that had to deal with leadership, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, developing the leaders around you, like all of these things became like who I was.
Yeah.
And then Catalyst launched back in the day. John Maxwell, I think it was Andy Stanley and some guys launched a movement called Catalyst. and it was about church leadership and business leadership. I downloaded every podcast I could on that because I wanted to know.
Yeah.
And my life is still similar today. The whom I listen to has changed a little bit, but it's definitely, when I drive, I listen to books and I listen to podcasts. I consume content about leadership more than the average person, I would imagine, because I love it.
Yeah.
And I have gotten burned out on it before as well.
Yeah.
Where I was like,
I got to put this up for a minute.
Yeah, I can't do this anymore.
Well, listen, leadership is needed in all respects, at least when I think of just where we're at in our country and churches and just business everywhere. I think there's a desire for great leadership. And I think it's so important to where we are now. And part of the reason that obviously we have you on is to talk about leadership in life. And you're talking about all these books that you've read, consumed, from John Maxwell to other leaders and people of influence within this topic. But one of the things you've done is you've written your own book.
Yeah.
So Lead Well. And I've had the opportunity to read this. I've actually read it a couple times. It's not too long, so I've had the opportunity to go through it a couple times.
Perfect.
And this is like the perfect book for me, by the way. You talked about not liking to read. That's me. Other than the Bible, man, I don't read much.
Right.
And I've had the opportunity to read this a couple times, and I've enjoyed it. But talk a little bit about this. So leadership is something that you consumed.
Yeah.
And then it became something that you've put out and shared with others. So what was the inspiration behind this? What brought you to write Lead Well and provide content for people to consume just like you're doing?
So if you're listening or watching, this is not like a personal plug, but I am very active on LinkedIn. I share leadership content on there daily, just about. And a lot of it is spiritual and practical. So it's both. I had a guy send me a message from Atlanta. His name's Carlos Cody.
Yeah.
He messaged me one evening. Said, "Hey, man, I got a question." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You ever thought about writing a devotional for people in the workplace?" And I was like, "No, but I have now."
Yeah.
And so I always wanted to write a book. I didn't think it would be anything like this. And so what I did was I sat down and I said, what could I write that was like to the point, that was simple, that had some questions that somebody that is in the workplace, if you're an executive, a CEO, or just an everyday blue collar person, that you could pick up in the morning and just read a page and think about it. And so I wrote down, topic after topic. And then I circled the ones that I thought I could create good content around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I came up with all the things that you see in the book. And the cool thing is that the process for me, I write a lot because I was putting together, at that point in time, you put together sermons, you put together talks. Anytime you speak to an organization or anything, you're putting together a talk.
Yeah.
And some of that came out in the book. And so I wrote about identity, like understanding who you are. I wrote about value, like knowing your worth. And each one of these is just 20 days. Each one of these has a practical concept and some questions to think through. So let's just say identity. So I would just say Psalm 139 says that you're fearfully, remarkably, and wondrously made in the image of God. Until you understand that, you're going to walk in somebody else's identity.
Yeah.
You're going to walk in a completely different place. And God made you. You be you is the first thing in the book. I share a story with my daughter. And I take her to school every morning. We get in the car and I'll say, right before I drop her off, I'll say, "Cooper, remember who you are. You are," and she'll say, "You." And I'll say, "You don't have to be anybody else," but she'll say, "You." And I'll say, "That's right. Love God, love your friends, and respect your teachers today." And that has been going on since kindergarten. She's 13 now, about to go into the 8th grade. And every morning, it's a reminder of who she is and whose she is.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I want her to know that she is not just mine, but more importantly, that she's God's.
Yeah.
And what it's done in a society that is struggling with identity, and in a society that's struggling like with what I do, how do I live my life? What I've done is I've affirmed in her more value than she'll probably she won't even realize the value probably until she gets older in life. But what I've seen it do is I've seen it play out in her decision making, because she's not making decisions based on what other people view her as, but she's making decisions based on who I say she is, who God says she is, and who she says that she is.
That's good.
And it's been so good to see it play out as a 13-year-old, because we know drama is always around the corner as a 13-year-old. My kid's not perfect, but she does a very, very good job with being reasonable, which is I say reasonable. We're somewhat reasonable for a 13-year-old. Yeah. And so I've been able to see it play out. So the book is just chocked full of all these. So the questions on the first front end of that is, what are some ways you can remind yourself of whose you are, or who you are today? And just have people think through this process of like, oh, okay, like, this is who I am. This is who God made me to be. I'm a leader in the workplace, and my family needs me to lead them. My coworkers need me to lead them. So I just tried to, compound a bunch of practical topics for the everyday person. Yeah. I think one of them is about anxiety. Another one's about rest. So as a leader, how do you operate when you're dealing with these things in life? Because it's all going to happen. Like anxiety it's going to happen. It's not if, it's when anxiety strikes. So how do we handle that as believers? And how do we handle that as people in the workplace, so that people in the workplace can see that we reflect an image that is of God?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I pride myself on being a non-anxious presence in anxious moments for other people. And you would be surprised at how many people, this is not just Christians, this is non-Christians, this is just people in general, when anxious moments come up, how they respond. People, some people just freak out. Yeah. And I'm very calm, and I don't always have the right answer, but just being calm for somebody is super helpful. So I write about all these things in the book. So shout out to Carlos Cody, because he was like, hey, have you ever thought of this? And I was like, no.
And that was the moment.
So I just started writing. The book's not long. Like Josiah said, it's 20 days, 1 page per day. It looks amazing. It
does. It feels amazing too.
Yeah, we got to the creative side of me got to play out some of it with my buddy Nathan. He created a lot of the way it looked, but I got to have creative liberty on I don't like this picture. Can we do this? There was a lot of things that we did, that he did in particular, that were amazing, because he knew me and he knew what I was trying to get out there. Yeah. So it's basically a journey. So from day 1 starts with who we are. Day 20 starts with being rested. Yeah. And the journey in between one of them is about the ups and downs of leadership. There's just so many things that I wanted to throw in there for people to understand. This is important take out not being a Christian. Just being a solid, good leader is crucial for your family, for your business, for sports teams, for our world to function. Yeah. We need good leadership.
We do.
So whether you're a Christian or not, at the end of the day, I want to impact people's leadership. It's just that I get to do it because I am a Christian. Yeah. And I believe that what I have most is a foundation built on something that if otherwise built on me, it's going to be bad. Yeah. I'm going to fail every time. So that's the whole concept for me is let's talk about identity. Let's talk about rest in a world that lives nonstop craziness. Yeah. kids games to sporting events to, school events to vacations. And we live our lives extremely stressed. And I think it's Ian Simpkins, pastor in Tennessee. I love Ian. He says that if busyness is your drug, then rest will feel like stress.
That's true.
And we live busy.
Yeah.
And it's a drug. And so when we get to rest, what it actually feels like is that I need something to do.
Yeah.
And it stresses us out.
Yeah.
And so the goal in this is to provide a 20-day just kind of jump start to being like, hey, I can do this. I've got this. I can lead well in whatever context it is that I am working in or living in.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love just the heart that you share behind it. One of the things that I think that I love most about all of this, and you've shared a lot of it, but just the practical side of it, because I think a lot of times that's at least where I find the most value in content and in just ideas, thoughts, concepts. A lot of times, I listen to stuff or I hear stuff and it's like, well, that's cool and all, like, and I agree with that, but like, how do you do it, right? Or how do I get there? And I think one of the things that you did well in leading well is writing this book and making it practical for the everyday reader. Anybody can pick this up, like you said. Take out the Christian side of it. If you read this, there's practical prompts. There's ways that it leads you through each and every day through this 20-day journey of growing in different leadership roles. So
and that was the goal. I mean, at the end of the day, I wanted to provide something for the person in the workplace that needed some structure around a day.
Yeah.
Like, what's my morning? Like, in the morning, I need 10 minutes. It'll probably take you less than that to do a morning session of reading Lead Well. I mean, 20 days, I think the average, they say 21 days is what the average. I didn't even know. I sold everybody short by a day. Gave 20 days.
It's never going to work.
Yeah, it's never going to work. Don't apply any of it. But yeah, my goal was, we're busy.
Yeah.
How can an entrepreneur or an executive or a CEO, how can they better their leadership practically?
Yeah.
Without having to, because we're talking about a book that's ancient. And so sometimes breaking that down practically for people is what's beneficial for them as humans here, especially in DFW, where it's fast paced.
Yeah, absolutely.
We live crazy lives. And so I just wanted to give people oh man, thank you. This helped. And hopefully it has and will continue to help.
I think it will. It's helped me, and hopefully it'll help those who are listening, those who are watching. Question for you. So getting to a more practical side of things, right? The book's very practical, talks about different topics. That being said, kind of more or less a question on the practicality of actually writing this. Was there a certain story or topic that you wrote on that was your favorite or that really means a lot to you here in the book?
Yeah. The one about pain.
Yeah.
About leadership pain. There's a picture of Van Gogh, his Starry Night.
Look at there.
Yeah.
Opened up.
From pain to purpose. And I think that it resonates with me because it's what I've come through.
Yeah.
And I think every human being, everybody deals with pain at some point in time.
Absolutely.
It can be physical, it can be spiritual, it can be mental. And you can resonate to this. I've seen a lot of people fail in life.
Yeah.
I failed, I failed as a pastor, as a leader in multiple ways, but that particular writing is a picture of Van Gogh. And I heard this story. This is not my story, but I heard this and it impacted me so much. In that picture of Van Gogh's Starry Night, it's blue and yellow and lit up and beautiful. It's beautiful imagery. As a matter of fact, if you zoom in on a starry night, there are lights on in every home. They're all lit up. There's one place in the middle of that painting that has no light.
Yep.
It's the church. And what most people don't know or understand, or probably haven't even heard about Van Gogh, is that Van Gogh was raised in an overbearing, religious, abusive home. His father was not good to him, and that he had a hard time finding God and seeing light in the church.
Yeah.
So what most people also don't know is that Van Gogh, when he painted A Starry Night, is that he painted it in a mental institution.
Wow.
And so Van Gogh would come out of the room and they would let him paint. And that's when he painted that picture. So I always say that sometimes our deepest pain produces our greatest work.
Yeah.
And that is true of me, and that is true of you.
Absolutely.
That is true of Van Gogh. That is true of anybody that has walked on this earth. Sometimes our deepest pain produces our greatest work. And that story has impacted me for the last probably 2 or 3 years. And I've been able to tell it, not just in the church context, but to so many people who have maybe struggled in their job or lost a job or went through a divorce or struggled in their life, or who had to shut down a church because of COVID and other circumstances, or who had to shut down ministries, businesses. Failure is a part of life, and it produces pain. Life is painful. And I think if I can encourage anybody through the book, is that story is something I believe that we can all resonate with.
Yeah.
Because pain gives purpose, vision. And I think that we don't realize that oftentimes the pain that we're enduring is actually producing vision for the purpose that we're going to walk into later on in our lives. And so that's changed my perspective on so many things.
Yeah.
Has it been easy? Nah, man.
No.
I still get anxious about things and struggle with things, but I'm reminded of pain allows us to really see the deepest wounded parts of us that actually produce the greatest stories in us.
That's so true.
And so that's my favorite part of the whole book.
Well, I want to actually read one that I actually marked in here. It was one of my favorite ones that you wrote, and it's actually right after that one you just shared, From Pain to Purpose, is the story you just shared. But the one that really resonated with me was fear. You wrote on fear, 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and sound judgment. And just reading here from the book, I want to read this, and I want you just to share about this, because, again, I receive so much, but I want to hear it from you. But it says this: fear. It's amazing the power one word can have over our lives. Fear cripples us. Often it keeps us from doing the very thing God has called us to do. Did you know that we are all only born with 2 fears? That's right, 2 of them. The fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. That's it. Every other fear that takes place in our life is something we've learned. Scripture tells us that we were not created to fear, that we were to be fearless, not fearful. Then why do we experience it? Why does it keep us from doing the very thing God has called us to do? It's really simple. Ego. We are afraid of what others may think. We're afraid that we might fail. And we are afraid that the reward is not worth the risk. Maybe you're reading this today. God has called you to do something out of the ordinary. Maybe he's asking you to take a risk. Maybe it's a new job. Maybe it's starting a company. Maybe it's starting a ministry. I don't know. But I do know that you will never know what he has in store for you if you let fear cripple you. In 2019, I planted a church. It was scary. Finances were tight, and I was trying to figure it all out. In 2020, the COVID pandemic hit. I had to close the doors of the church, and I was scared. Where were resources going to come from? How was I going to provide for my daughter? I was crippled with fear. I would lay in my bed at night and cry. I would play the victim card and say, God, why me? And finally, I did something I did the only thing I knew to do, reestablish my faith in God. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't need all the answers. All I needed to know was that during the global pandemic, I was going to fear less and trust more. And then the prompt, so what is it right now in this moment? What do you need to fear less? What fear do you need to face? What is holding you back from all God is calling you to do? And this really blessed me, going back to a practical standpoint, right, of hearing from you and talking about leadership. I think that the way that you really embrace the call of leadership, and in also embracing it, also understanding the vulnerability that is required in it. Yeah. And so for me, that was such a blessing for me to read, and a word of encouragement for me in a season, in a moment where, I found myself in the same place, right? Where you talk about pain. It's something that we'll all experience, and oftentimes, our greatest pain will ultimately allow us to see our purpose that God has for us. But thinking about that moment, you've talked about a little bit of it, but yeah. What obviously inspired you to write that and to encourage people on the topic of fear?
I think that fear, it makes us vulnerable. And I honest to God, I think that we're a very insecure people group.
Yeah.
And what insecurity does is it produces fear. And I would love to sit here and say like, oh man, I'm not scared of anything. And the reason is that the reason I can't say that is because I am insecure.
Yeah.
And most people in leadership roles would not be willing to say I'm insecure. But I think when you're able to recognize what it is that's keeping you from going to the next level in life, the next level in ministry, the next level in marriage, the next level in parenting, when you realize that a lot of that stems from insecurity, and you look in the mirror and you say, okay, I got two options. Continue to live fear more, or live fearless. And I love that God's design for us was not to be fearful.
Yeah.
And yet here we are learning these attributes in life that keep us from doing and fulfilling the very thing that God called us to fulfill. Now, some people would say, I felt like I was called to plant a church. And I was. And some people would say, well, it failed. And I would say, yes, it did. But I would also say that doing that exposed a lot of things in my life that I was very insecure about.
Yeah.
And so until that stuff is brought to the light, I think you're going to struggle. You're going to live in fear. You're going to live. You've got to have some people around you that you can really, really trust.
Yeah.
To be like, hey, here's where I'm at, and I need some help. And I think a lot of leaders think that if they let go of certain things, their fear is that other people won't do it as good as they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I would say that your superpower as a leader is to let go of things so that people can do it better than you did it, so that it can move you, your organization, your business, your family to a level that you never thought it could be in.
Yeah.
And so when I think about fear, man, it's hard. Timothy was a young protege. He was pastoring a large church.
Yeah.
Dude was scared. Like, he was like, man, like, and he writes, God has not given us, or Paul writes to him, hey, bro, I got your back. God's not given us a spirit of fear.
Yeah.
but of power and love. And the passage I used said sound judgment. Some scripture would say sound mind.
Yeah.
But I love sound judgment. Yeah. That's being able to have an EQ, like a very good, head on your shoulders that says, okay, I'm making quality choices with my life. I'm doing the right thing. And so, man, fear has punched me in the face more times than I can ever imagine. But I think the leader that doesn't get up is the one that submits to fear.
Yeah, that's so good.
And so I've just lived my life like, am I going to get knocked down? Absolutely. Will I continue to get back up? Absolutely. Because God has not given me a spirit of fear. Am I going to be anxious? Yes. Well, the Bible says to not be anxious about anything. Well, that's just stop. Like, we're all anxious about something. Just because it says it doesn't practically mean everything. You're anxious about your kids sometimes, your job, your finances. It's what happens when something happens to our life. It's how we respond to what happens to us in our life that I think changes fear and anxiety and rejection and all these things that we experience as humans. Yeah. So I'm glad that even for you, man, like that passage or that particular moment stuck out, because I know we've had conversations about what you've endured and been through and walked through. And those scary moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's part of life.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't get to choose what happens to you, but you do get to choose how you respond to what happens to you.
Absolutely.
And I want to respond in a way that's God honoring, that says, you know what? Yeah, I failed, but we're gonna get back up. And anybody who's in leadership in any organization, whether it's church, business, they have all at some point in time failed. They just have. Because I think that's why they're successful. I said this recently. I think as Michael Jordan talks about this idea of like, I've missed so many thousands of shots, I've done all these things that he failed at, and then at the end of it, he says, "This is why This is why I succeed." Yeah, and I think that's so true. I also read a deal the other day that talked about, or read an article the other day about Steph Curry and how many shots he shoots in practice in order to prep for a game. And the percentages that he's going to make them in a game is like, 38 to 41%. That's not like, that's high, but it's when you think about life. Yeah. It's not that crazy. And so I think that oftentimes what we do is we allow that to keep us, that fear or that what if, or what will people think about me if I do fail, to keep us from doing the very thing that God has called us to do. And I think that failing is what God has called all of us to do. Yeah. Here's why. Because it makes us less independent and makes us codependent on Him, or dependent on Him. Yeah, absolutely. And most of us want to. You have how many kids do you have? 4. At some point in time, you want them to feed themselves. You want them, and there's a point where like the food's all over their face, right? Yeah. We want them to move from dependence to independence, right? What we've done though is, as we move into independence and we get older, we realize we forget that we actually are not created to be independent people. We're created to be dependent on God. Yeah. And that's why John 15 says that I'm the vine, you're the branches. Apart from me, guess what you can't do? Anything. Yep. And so like I always say, like, man, this whole dependence thing is really, I need to take risk, because if I can do it, then that's on me. But if only God can do it, that means I have to depend on Him. Yeah. I know I'd much rather be in that place than any other place in the world. Absolutely. And I love what you're talking about. Even as you talk about fear, right? It ultimately leads back to trust in God. Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. A dependence on Him. And one of the things I've always said that I want to be good at is I want to be good at failing. Like, yes, I want to be good at failing. Going back to what you were talking about, right? It's about what you do with that allows you to go into the next season. And, I'm speaking firsthand experience, even in the season that we're in.
the reason that I'm here in the clarity that we have within the purpose that God is leading me and my family in is because of the failure that we've experienced. And those are moments that I truly am grateful for. You know, you think about the failures that you've walked through. It's not always fun. It's not pretty all the time, but you learn from it, you grow from it. And at the end of the day, if you learn to trust through it, God's going to see you through, and He's going to pull you through.
Yeah, I'm completely different because of my failures.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I don't think that I would have this. I wouldn't have this vulnerability and this idea of who I am as a person without failing, because failure makes you look in the mirror.
Yeah.
And when you look in the mirror, you either have to look at it and say, okay, I got some things I need to fix, because mirrors point out all of our flaws. And I think that, you know, when you get ready to go to an event, you're always going to look in the mirror and see what your outfit looks like. Well, most of us, we're only looking in the mirror to go to the event. We're not looking in the mirror to really assess, man, I got to get better here. I got to get better there. I need to be, you know, and mirrors are not fun, but they are beneficial.
Yeah.
For our lives.
They're also honest.
Yes. 100% honest. Get the tall, skinny ones.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I think we just came up with a new book idea. I think your next book should be Fail Well. And there's a ton of content you've already provided,
tons,
man.
Yeah.
I think we could learn for it. I could co-author it for you because I've had enough failures in my life too. But I think it truly is about what you do with it, how you respond to it, and being able to trust. So, all right, man. Kind of wrapping this thing up, what are you doing today, in this moment and in this season of your life, with all that you're going through in focusing on leadership for yourself, and also for others and leading other people, and pushing what God has laid on your heart?
I think that there are two things. Number one, I think that if you are leading people, the best leader is a self-aware leader. And so until you know whose you are and who you are, then you're never going to lead others the best way you know how. So what I'm very aware of now personally is where I'm at in my quiet time. Where I'm at in my quiet time, like, I'm not saying let's go read like 5 chapters a day of the Bible. I'm saying like practical. I write. I have a 5-year journal. It's 5 lines a day. And I read. My morning routine is a lot of that.
Yeah.
My prayer time is less me talking and more me listening. So I don't do a lot of talking anymore.
Yeah.
I'm sitting quiet. And book shout out, John Mark Comer's Practicing the Way. Amazing about this very practice of quiet and spending time with God and discipleship. So right now, that's what I'm doing. In the context of leading others, I think that one of the things that I'm really working on is knowing the strengths and weaknesses of the people that I work with and work for, and asking the right question to get the best result out of that person.
Yeah.
I'm a talker. We're talking on a podcast.
Yep.
So I have had to learn to listen more than I respond. And some people, they just need an ear. And so what I'm doing more now than ever is coaching through just asking some questions. One of them could be as simple as like, tell me more about that. And just let them talk. I tell this to people on my team. I'll say, I hear you. And I'll just sit in silence. Yeah. I hear you. And I'm with you. And it's so freeing for them to be like, oh, okay, like this person hears what I'm saying. I'm not disregarding it. They could be completely wrong. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you. That's most of the time, that's what people need.
Yeah, they need to be heard.
They need to be heard.
Yeah.
And when you follow up what you've heard them say with a few, why do you think that that's bothering you? say nothing.
Yeah.
Just listen. So, and then I'll say, so what I'm hearing, and I'll say, correct me if I'm wrong in this. This is what I hear you saying to me. And I'll say, do I have permission to kind of speak into this? Yeah. Here's what I'm hearing. And I'll kind of repeat back some things. And I'll say, some things like, is that how you feel? Or is that what you want? And I had to do this with a coworker a while back, that something was going wrong. And I said, do you feel that way because of X, Y, Z? Yeah. Why is that? I don't know. I just feel, and eventually I knew what I wanted to say. Eventually this person said, it just makes me feel insecure. And I was like, now we're getting to, I was like, why does it make you feel insecure?
Yeah.
Well, because at my last job, is this your last job or is this your job now?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we don't treat you like your last job. And so like it was an insecurity that the person was either, pushing down or not even realizing that they were insecure about something.
Yeah.
And I said, I want you to go to your office until you find out what that insecurity is. Don't come back to me. Let's get to the root of what's actually going on in your life. If you're insecure about something, what is it?
Yeah.
And they did. They went to their office and I said, I want you to write it all out. Okay. And so I've spent my last few years in leadership in developing a very raw idea of who I am. Like, man, I'm flawed in all these ways, and listening to a lot of people and trying to just ask the right questions, because for the most part in leadership, it's usually just not clear. And we make decisions for organizations and for our life personally by holding people to unclear, communicated expectations.
Yeah.
And even for ourselves, like, I want to start a diet. What's your meal plan? Like, what? I want to run a marathon. When I ran a half marathon. I've ran 4. You download a running plan that gives you how many miles you have to run a week. I did that because I had never done it before.
Yeah, you didn't know what to expect.
So I put it out there. I need to know. And so I think that communicated to me, here's how many miles you're going to run this week. It sucked, but I think we don't communicate clear enough. And part of that is because we spend too much time trying to solve somebody's problem that they already know the answer to.
Yep.
They just need to vent.
That's so true. Helping people find it, helping people reveal what they know is there all along, and getting better and growing from it. So I love it, man. All right. Well, where can people find you? You're a pastor, right?
Yeah. So I work for an amazing organization, an amazing church called Compass Church here in the DFW Metroplex. So we have 4 locations. I'm at our Roanoke location. You can find me there. Most weekends, you can find me on our website. I'm right there. I've gotten some amazing emails. You can also find me on about every social media platform there is, except for X, because I didn't make the jump. They deleted my account when so I was done. I had Twitter when it was like really 140 characters, like 2000. I had Twitter on a desktop before it was even on but now I don't have that. But yeah, Instagram, Mitch Sugg, Facebook, Mitch Sugg. LinkedIn, Mitch Sugg. What's the other? TikTok. Yeah, I just started diving into that a little bit. It's awkward for me, but
you're there.
I'm there. I have a 13-year-old, so I've got to know what's going on in her world. I really just stalk it.
And can we also find you at MitchSugg.com?
You can, MitchSugg.com. You can order my book there. There's some testimonials there and just some information. I do speak for organizations, companies, and churches. So there's some clips on there of me speaking. I am a part of a speakers bureau called C-Suite for Christ.
Love it.
And I'm 2025 going to speak at one of their events. I just got booked for that. So it's just C-Suite executives coming together, and I'm pumped about that opportunity to share the gospel with C-Suite executives all over the U.S. So I'm pumped about that. But that's all that information's there.
All right. Well, hey, go show our friend here, Mitch, some love. You can find him on social media. You can visit his website at mitchsugg.com. Book him, have him come speak, encourage you, and have him lead well in whatever way you need him to. And then stop by, grab his book. I promise it'll be an encouragement to you. It was an encouragement to me.
Awesome,
and I appreciate what you're doing in the church, what you're doing in leadership. And I look forward to seeing what God continues to do through you here in this season and in the next.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
For being here, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us today on the podcast and listening in on our leadership talk with Mitch Sugg. Be sure to visit Mitch's website at mitchsugg.com where you can connect with him or purchase your copy of Lead Well. Thanks again for listening to the Endurance Collective podcast. Stay blessed.